Millions of people watched her sing. They voted for her. They cheered for her. But very few knew the full story behind the girl standing on that stage. Hannah Harper's journey to American Idol was not a simple rise to fame. It was built on years of silence, sacrifice, and struggles the cameras never fully captured. The story the show presented was only a fraction of the truth. Stay with us, because what really happened before, during, and after that spotlight is far more powerful. Bunker, Missouri is not the kind of place most people have heard of. It sits in the heart of Reynolds County, deep in the rural southeast corner of the state. The roads are quiet. The towns are small. Life moves at its own pace. This is where Hannah Harper was born on November 19, 1999. She grew up in a household shaped by two things above everything else: family and faith. Her father, Galen, worked at a local lead mine. Her mother, Katrina, kept the home together. It was a modest life, a familiar life, the kind of life that goes on the same way for generations in small American towns. But Galen had a dream that was bigger than the mine. He loved music, bluegrass gospel music, to be specific, the kind that fills small churches with harmonies that seem to come from somewhere deep in the chest. He played.
His wife sang.
Their children grew up surrounded by it. And one day, Galen made a decision that most people would never make. He quit his job at the lead mine. He sold what needed to be sold. And he moved the entire family into a 40-foot-long bright red tour bus. Just like that, the Harpers became a traveling band. The bus became their home. The road became their backyard. Hannah was young, still just a child, but she adapted the way children do. She did not know a life with a fixed bedroom and a regular school schedule. She knew the hum of an engine, the smell of a new town, and the sound of her family tuning their instruments before a show. They traveled coast to coast. They played in churches, at gospel festivals, at small community events scattered across America. They were not chasing fame. They were, in Hannah's own words, just going coast to coast and singing for the Lord. Hannah stepped onto her first stage at 9 years old. That is not a detail to pass over lightly. Most children at 9 are learning multiplication tables and arguing about bedtime. Hannah was standing in front of live audiences, holding an instrument, and performing with her family in front of strangers who had come to be moved by music. She was not a performer in the commercial sense. She did not have an agent or a manager. There were no social media pages promoting her name. She was simply a girl with a voice, raised by people who believed music was a calling. The family band eventually became known as the Harper Collective. The lineup included her parents, her siblings Dylan and Dalton, and Dylan's wife McKenna. They were a tight unit, on stage and off. Living in a shared space the size of a large living room teaches you a great deal about patience, about compromise, and about how much you love the people around you. They were also genuinely talented. In 2010, when Hannah was just 10 years old, the Harper Collective won the SBBGMA International Band Contest. The Society for the Preservation of Bluegrass Music of America is not a small organization. Winning their international competition meant the Harpers were among the best bluegrass acts in the country. But outside the tight world of bluegrass gospel music, almost no one knew their name. They did not appear on television. They did not have a record deal. Their audience was made up of faithful congregations and devoted festival crowds, people who understood the music deeply, but who lived far from the spotlight of mainstream entertainment. For Hannah, those years were her entire world. She was growing up. She was learning. Every performance added something to her voice: texture, confidence, the ability to hold a note in front of a crowd without flinching. She was not practicing in a bedroom mirror. She was doing the real thing, night after night, year after year. This is the part of Hannah Harper's story that American Idol could not fully contain in a short audition segment. The show showed viewers a woman with a warm voice and an original song. What it could not show, not entirely, was the decades of formation behind that voice. By the time Hannah reached her teenage years, she had already lived more of a musician's life than most artists twice her age. She had played in more venues. She had traveled more miles. She had learned what it meant to perform not for applause, but for something much quieter and much more lasting. But the life Hannah had always known was about to come to an end, And what came next would push her into the darkest chapter of her life. From 2009 to 2016, Hannah Harper spent her formative years on the road with her family. 7 years of touring. 7 years of performing. 7 years of waking up somewhere new and falling asleep to the sound of the road. Then, in 2016, it ended. The Harper collective stopped traveling. The bright red bus that had been their home pulled over for the last time. Life had shifted. The family was growing older. The season of touring had run its course. And Hannah, now a teenager, came home to Missouri. For an artist who had spent her entire childhood in motion, stillness was strange. There were no more stages to step onto each week. No more church halls filling with familiar harmonies. The music that had shaped her entire identity was suddenly quiet. Not gone, but quiet. Pushed to the edges of daily life in a way it had never been before. She was 17 years old and, in many ways, starting over. 2 years later, in 2018, Hannah married Devin Mendenhall. She was 18 years old. The two had met years earlier as teenagers in a small church in southeast Missouri, where Hannah had served as a worship leader. Their connection began simply. Two young people who shared the same faith, the same community, and the same roots. What started as a quiet small-town romance grew into a partnership that would eventually hold an enormous dream together. In the years after their wedding, Hannah and Devin built a life. A real, ordinary, beautiful life. 3 boys arrived, one after another. The house filled with noise and laughter, and the specific kind of organized chaos that comes with raising young children. There were Hot Wheels on the floor. There were requests for snacks. There was coffee that got reheated 3 times before it was ever finished. Hannah was no longer a traveling performer. She was a stay-at-home mother, and she embraced that role with the same commitment she had brought to every stage she had ever stood on. But something was quietly happening beneath the surface. Postpartum depression is a medical condition. It is not sadness. It is not weakness. It is a documented, serious condition that affects roughly 1 in 5 mothers after giving birth. It can arrive slowly, or it can arrive all at once. It can make the most loving moments feel exhausting. It can make a person feel invisible inside their own life, present in the room but lost in their own mind. Hannah was navigating this while raising 3 young children. She did not speak about it publicly at first. She did not post about it on social media. She carried it the way many mothers do, quietly and without asking for much help, because there were always more immediate things to attend to. But the feelings were real. And they were heavy. It was in the middle of that season, somewhere in the exhaustion and the love and the repetition of it all, that Hannah reached for the one thing that had always helped her make sense of the world. She reached for music, not for an audience, not for a record deal, not for any reason other than the simple and human need to put something somewhere before it became too heavy to carry alone. She sat down and wrote a song. She called it String Cheese. The title sounds almost funny at first. But the song was not funny. It was honest. It was about the feeling of being overwhelmed and touched out, about the days that blur together, about loving your children more than anything in the world and still feeling like you are disappearing somewhere inside the routine of caring for them. It was also about small moments, the specific, quiet details of motherhood that nobody writes songs about. String cheese on the counter, nursery rhymes on the television, the hum of a house that never fully settles. Hannah recorded the track and posted it on her personal Facebook page. She was not launching a music career. She was not testing the market. She was sharing something private with the people in her small circle, friends, family, neighbors. People who knew her. People who would understand. She never expected anyone outside her small circle to hear it. Then one morning, everything changed. It was around Mother's Day 2025 when Hannah quietly uploaded String Cheese to her Facebook page. No press release. No promotional strategy. No taglines. She was a stay-at-home mother in rural Missouri sharing a song she had written for herself. But the internet does not always respect the boundaries of intention. Someone shared the song. Then someone else did. The track made its way onto TikTok, a platform built for exactly this kind of moment, where authenticity travels faster than anything polished or produced. The algorithm did not know that Hannah had not intended the song for a wide audience. It only knew that people were watching, sharing, and staying. Because the song was real, mothers recognized it immediately. Not just the topic, but the texture of it. The feeling Hannah described was one that millions of women knew but had rarely heard articulated in music. That specific exhaustion of loving someone completely while also feeling lost somewhere inside the weight of caring for them every single day. The song spread, quietly at first, then steadily, then undeniably. Comments poured in from mothers across the country. Many said it was the first time they had heard their own experience put into words. Some said they cried. Some said they played it for their husbands. Some said they played it alone, in the car, where no one could see them. Hannah had written string cheese to put something heavy somewhere safe. Instead, she had accidentally written something that belonged to a much larger group of people than she had ever imagined. The numbers told their own story. String Cheese eventually climbed to number 14 on the Billboard Country Digital Songs chart. That is an extraordinary achievement under any circumstances. For a song that had been recorded and posted to Facebook without any industry backing, it was almost unheard of. For an active contestant on a national television show with no formal record deal, it was remarkable. But the chart position was almost beside the point. The song was connecting with people in a way that numbers cannot fully measure. It was being passed between women like something precious, shared quietly, listened to carefully, appreciated not for its production value, but for its truth. Hannah sat with all of this in a way that felt disorienting. She was still a stay-at-home mother in Bunker, Missouri. She was still reheating her coffee. She was still answering snack requests and stepping over toys. But suddenly there was a public conversation happening around words she had written in private, and that conversation was growing. She had a choice to make. Most contestants who audition for American Idol arrive with a song designed to impress. They bring big voices, dramatic arrangements, and cover songs chosen specifically to showcase their range. The audition room is not a place most people associate with quiet vulnerability. Hannah chose String Cheese. It was a decision that said something important about who she was and what she valued. She was not going to walk into that room pretending to be something she was not. She was going to bring the most honest thing she had, a song about her real life, written in her real voice, for no audience at all. She would sing it for three of the most listened-to figures in American music: Lionel Richie, Carrie Underwood, Luke Bryan. And she would play it on her guitar, exactly as she had recorded it in the quiet of her own life. The choice was either going to be the most authentic thing the judges had heard all season, or it was going to fall flat in a room designed for spectacle. 3 judges. 1 original song. 1 moment that would either end her journey or begin it, and what happened in that room nobody fully expected. February 2nd, 2026. Hannah Harper walked into the American Idol audition room carrying a guitar and a song she had written for herself. Her husband, Devin, was beside her. He had his own guitar. He was going to play alongside her, not to steal focus, but because that is how the song was meant to sound. That is how they had always done things together. The cameras were rolling. The judges were seated. The room was quiet. Hannah introduced herself as a stay-at-home mother of 3 from Missouri. She talked briefly about her background, the family band, the touring years, the life she had built since coming home. Then she started to play. The song that followed was not a showpiece. It was not designed to demonstrate a 5-octave range or a powerful belt. It was a story, told simply and honestly, the way a good song is always told. The voice that delivered it carried something in it that is difficult to manufacture, a quality that comes from years of singing in churches and festival halls, not recording studios. Carrie Underwood began to cry. This is worth pausing on. Carrie Underwood is one of the most successful artists in American country music history. She is also a mother. She knows the world Hannah was describing, not from the outside, but from the inside. When the song reached her, it did not reach her as a judge evaluating a contestant. It reached her as a person who recognized something true. She wiped her eyes. She looked at Hannah, and she told her she was like her favorite person. Luke Bryan spoke next. He compared Hannah's voice to Casey Musgraves, to Alison Krauss, to Dolly Parton. He pointed out the specific quality in her sound, a mountainous bluegrass resonance that is not something you learn in a few months of lessons. It is something that comes from years of living inside a particular musical tradition. Lionel Richie offered something beyond praise. He gave Hannah a frame for what she could become. He told her to study Dolly Parton, not just for the sound but for two specific things: the storytelling and the lift. Dolly Parton, Richie explained, has the rare ability to tell a story that comes from pain and then give the listener somewhere higher to go. He told Hannah she had the range to do the same thing. These were not throwaway comments from judges trying to fill airtime. These were three accomplished musicians telling a stay-at-home mother from Missouri that her voice belonged in the same conversation as the most enduring artists in the history of country music. And behind Hannah, Devin sat with his guitar. Most viewers probably did not focus on Devin for very long, but his presence in that room meant everything. Devin Mendenhall had been a law enforcement officer in southern Missouri. It is a demanding profession, one that comes with its own sense of identity and purpose. When Hannah decided to pursue this opportunity, Devin made a choice that does not get made easily. He stepped away from his career. He became the parent at home, the one managing the boys, handling the household, holding everything steady while Hannah stood on stages. He did this not because it was convenient but because he believed in his wife. Because he had believed in her since they were teenagers in the same small church in southeast Missouri. The guitar he played during her audition was not just accompaniment. It was a symbol of everything he had chosen to give up so that she could have this chance. All three judges voted yes. For Hannah, standing in that room with 3 yes votes, the weight of what had just happened was almost impossible to process in real time. This was not just a television competition. This was the answer to a question she had been quietly carrying for years, the question of whether her voice still had somewhere to go.
It did.
3 yes votes sent her forward. But advancing on American Idol is only the beginning, and the hardest part of Hannah's story was still ahead. Week after week, Hannah Harper kept advancing. Hollywood Week, the Ohana Round in Hawaii, the Top 20. Each cut brought fewer contestants and higher stakes. Each stage was bigger. Each performance was watched by more people. But the story of what Hannah was carrying through those stages is not one the cameras always captured fully. During the round that would determine the top 20 finalists, Hannah chose to perform "Go Rest High on That Mountain," a Vince Gill song that has become one of the most recognized hymns in country music. It is a song about grief,
About loss.
about the peace that comes after a long, difficult life. Hannah was not choosing it for its chart history. She was choosing it because her grandfather had died. The performance was not a strategic move. It was a tribute. It was grief made visible in the only way Hannah had ever fully known how to express it, through music, in front of an audience, with complete honesty. She earned her place in the top 20 that night. The competition continued. And so did the emotional weight behind each song choice. During the Songs of Faith episode, a live show in which contestants performed faith-based music, Hannah delivered a performance of Chris Tomlin's "At the Cross, Love Ran Red." All 3 judges praised it. For Hannah, the song was not a calculated choice designed to appeal to a demographic. Faith had been the foundation of her entire musical life. It was present on the tour bus when she was 9 years old. It was present in the church where she had first met Devin. It was present in every stage she had ever stood on. Performing faith-based music on a mainstream national television platform carries its own kind of pressure. Not everyone in the audience shares the same beliefs. Not every network moment is designed for that kind of raw sincerity. But Hannah did not adjust. She sang what she believed, the way she had always sung it. The audience responded. Then something unexpected happened, and it had nothing to do with music. Midway through the competition season, a rumor began circulating online. It claimed that Hannah Harper had quietly left American Idol to sign a record deal with Butterfly Records, the label associated with Dolly Parton. The rumor spread quickly. It moved through social media the way misinformation often does, carried by genuine excitement, passed along before anyone thought to verify it. Hannah had to address it publicly. She clarified clearly that she had not signed any record deal. She was still in the competition. She was still a contestant. But the fact that the rumor existed at all said something important. Her story had grown so large, her presence had become so dominant, that people were willing to believe she had already been claimed by one of the biggest names in country music. That is an unusual kind of recognition for a contestant still competing on a weekly television show. Back home in Missouri, the response to Hannah's journey was unlike anything Reynolds County had seen in a long time. She performed sold-out concerts in the Poplar Bluff community between filming rounds. Venues that announced her name filled up quickly. The woman who had posted a song quietly on Facebook for a small circle of friends and family was now drawing crowds in her own hometown, people who had watched her every week and wanted to be in the same room with her. The contrast was almost difficult to believe. Less than a year earlier, Hannah Harper had been reheating her coffee and writing songs that she assumed no one outside her household would ever hear. Now her name was leading national fan polls. Now sold-out signs were going up in Missouri. Now 3 of the most respected judges in American music had compared her to legends. She had made it to the top 9. But the bigger question was no longer whether she could win American Idol. It was what winning would actually mean for a woman whose whole story had been built on something far deeper than fame. On the night of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame episode, Hannah Harper walked to the center of the stage and began to play Landslide by Fleetwood Mac.
It is a song about time.
About change. About the fear of losing yourself as life moves forward and the world shifts beneath your feet. Stevie Nicks wrote it in 1975 when she was 26 years old and uncertain about almost everything. She was asking whether she could handle the seasons of her own life. Hannah was 25. She had spent years uncertain about the same things. When the performance ended, the numbers spoke clearly. She received 41% of the fan vote that night, more than double the second-place contestant. Carrie Underwood called it absolutely gorgeous and said it was the perfect song choice. Luke Bryan said the performance made him forget he was a judge on a television competition. The gap between Hannah and the rest of the field that night was not close. It was not even a competition.
It was a statement.
But this chapter is not really about the vote percentage or the judges' comments. Those are important. They are real. But they are not the full story. The full story is this. Hannah Harper is a 25-year-old mother of 3 from Bunker, Missouri. She grew up on a 40-foot tour bus, performing in churches for audiences who would never appear in any entertainment industry database. She spent 7 years in motion and then came home to stillness. She married young. She built a family. She navigated postpartum depression in a house full of little boys who needed her every hour of every day. She wrote a song about string cheese because she needed somewhere to put the weight of being overwhelmed. She never planned any of this. And yet here she was, standing on one of the most watched stages in American television, being compared to Dolly Parton by the people best qualified to make that comparison. Throughout the competition, one relationship remained constant behind every performance.
Devin.
The cameras showed Devin at Hannah's audition, playing guitar. They showed him in the audience on live show nights. But the cameras could not fully show what Devin had given up to be there, a career, a professional identity, the daily work that defined his life before Hannah's dream became the center of their shared one. He had taken on everything at home so that she could have everything on stage. That is not a small sacrifice. It is the kind of sacrifice that holds a dream together from the outside, quietly and without recognition. Then there was a moment that happened away from the stage entirely. Carrie Underwood sent Hannah a gift. It was a piece of jewelry from Tiffany & Company, and alongside it, a handwritten note. Hannah shared her reaction publicly. She said she had not expected the jewelry, but it was the note that moved her most. The fact that Carrie Underwood had taken the time to sit down and write something by hand, to say something personal, in her own words, meant more than any televised moment. Hannah said it said everything about who Carrie was as a person. It was a small gesture, but it was also the kind of gesture that tells a larger story about what happens when someone in a position of great success chooses to make a person who is just beginning feel genuinely seen. Hannah Harper went into American Idol as a stay-at-home mother who had posted a song on Facebook. She came out of it as something harder to define. Not just a contestant. Not just a singer. but a person whose story had reached into living rooms across America and found something in the people watching, a recognition, a resonance, a quiet understanding that honest voices do not need perfect conditions to be heard. She did not need fame to validate her. The song was already real before anyone outside her small circle heard it. The voice was already formed before any judge evaluated it. The love and sacrifice at the center of her story existed long before any camera ever pointed in her direction. What American Idol gave Hannah Harper was a stage large enough for the rest of the world to finally catch up to something that had always been there. And sometimes that is exactly enough. Hannah Harper's story is still being written. The competition has not ended. The final chapters have not yet been filmed. But regardless of how season 24 of American Idol concludes, one thing is already clear. A woman from a small town in Missouri, raised on a tour bus, shaped by faith, tested by the silence of years spent far from any stage, found her way back to music. And when she did, the world was listening. If this story moved you, consider subscribing to the channel. There are more real-life journeys like this one, stories that go deeper than the headlines and find the truth that cameras often miss.